Well, it's afternoon at the McDonald's. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10. Apparently, their slogan is "Murder Your Thirst." 10 of them, just like this. You see that? Do we look alike? This is what replaced the eggplant spread and the cartons of eggs. I guess somebody liked that, and what did they do? Get it for themselves? That's what we got. It's not beer. It's sparkling water from the Alps. Nice, huh? At first glance, it might look like a hard cider or maybe a beer, but it's not. It's just sparkling water. It's alcohol-free. Somebody might think they accomplished something, right? All right. I got to be honest with you. I'm having one of those moments today. I saw something today that is so repulsive to me that it kind of eliminates context around which you consider another's humanity, right? I've been here for 4 years. I got here on the day of a more than $300 million municipal bond that I could trace as part of bond flips going all the way back to 1977, May of 1977, when there was a month-long period during which a bond for upstate New York was being issued. It turns out the company that was responsible, the brokerage responsible for this bond issue, is one that's frequently listed on bond issues that are specifically connected to the pattern associated with my life, first of all, but also with other major events. And it happens to be based out of Chicago. In 2016, I was investigating water bonds for the city of Chicago, and this specific brokerage was responsible for providing information available at the time to the city of Chicago sites concerning its water bond issuances, one of which had a first lien and another of which had a second lien, during the time frame in which the city of Chicago was considering issuing another water bond. I was concerned, and I'd even contacted members of the city council. I contacted the office of every single member of the Progressive Caucus for the City of Chicago Council regarding these water bonds. I only got one person to respond to me on the phone, very briefly. He said, well, if you're interested in the water bonds, look at the toxic swaps. I didn't understand exactly what the implications are, but we're dealing with it now. Would this be considered a toxic swap? I mean, it's sparkling water, right? I'm sure it tastes good. But look at the branding. Liquid death. Murder your thirst. Straight from the Alps. You mean like Switzerland? See, I was considering Switzerland just today, right? And this just happens to show up. There's not 13 of them, by the way. There's not 13 in one, by the way. There's 10. That's personal, right? It's very personal. But I'm kind of concerned, right? When I got here, they had this display at the library. It was completely offensive. I have not been to the children's floor since that first time I went there and saw that display. That's how offended I was. And I do this thing where every night they run some really, really comprehensive tranche on me. And it's like there's all of this commerce going that I would never have approved of, most of which is illegal. So I spend most of the night doing these verbal digests, right? And then I track the next day what was going on as part of my verbal digest. And I'm able to track it. It's that precise. I don't know who thought they were authorized to use me as their own personal off-the-market, off-ledger clearinghouse for actions that include very illegal transactional processes, including some connected to national commerce of countries identified as enemies of the United States. But they thought they could. This is why I'm concerned about this May 17, 2022 motion in this case regarding Wendy's and McDonald's. See, I've been coming to McDonald's pretty much every day because it's a routine. You can't make an excuse for saying you didn't know how to contact me. Surveillance cameras in the lobby. I know they record it, which also means they can produce it for evidence, right? But in the meantime, we got this problem with material misinformation. Did you ever read that case that went to the Supreme Court regarding AIG in 2010? Right around the time that the options on their stock buybacks were expiring, they had a case before the Supreme Court about material misinformation and their obligations to their shareholders. Well, then in 2020, what happened? Well, Goldman Sachs did the same thing. Right around the time it was announcing it was going to support a major project regarding not only the crypto economy, but also an initiative called 1 Million Black Women. Goldman Sachs was going to put substantial financial resources toward supporting African American women in finance to the tune of supporting initiatives aimed at empowering 1 million black women. Did they mean black women or did they mean black women, right? Same matters brought up in these cases 10 years apart. Now, 2 years down the road, they want to set it up on McDonald's and Wendy's. See, what this tells me is that somebody has been working a portfolio of cattle futures, right? And when you saw those heifers up front, you liked what you saw. Maybe somebody explained to you the branding and whose brand it was, so you thought you were going to get some of that. But if they do these illegal swaps, and they keep doing these central counterparty positions with people that have not been informed up front, whose consent has not been acquired, and are intentionally misrepresented, so they're misleveraged, well, by the time your option comes, do you still want that heifer? And see, this seems to be the problem, right? It's not just about not looking like what the picture says. Pictures can be altered. Pictures often don't tell you what you actually get when you see somebody real time in real life. This is why it makes a difference when they've alienated us so significantly. We can go years, literally years, without having a conversation in person with anybody, including in a time frame during which every single phone call we make ends up connecting us with somebody who says, I'm sorry, I can't give you that information, I can't help you, and no, I can't refer you to the person who can. Years and years and years of artificial, intentional, illegal depreciation of your own personal currency. By the time the option comes due, well, I don't want her anymore. See, I have a feeling that right around the time of the 2008 banking crisis, the people already had their options lined up. When those guys at the top went bankrupt, or when they had those problems, they weren't expecting to be able to offload all of that based on their own personal assets. See, their personal assets were defined by other people's personal assets. So there was this misrepresentation that other people, well, they didn't have the credit they said they did. I'm sorry. It would seem the people who were providing the credit report didn't have either the correct information or they weren't actually working with the portfolios they thought they were. I contend they knew this. And so what has been happening is in the last 10 years they've been trying to flip it. We're all supposed to identify as if we're one of those big guys. So we make excuses about how we can't do all these different things, and it's okay, and if we skip here, that's fine. If we have to take somebody else's identity, that's okay. And if we don't get it legally, that's fine. And if they tell us they need us to give up everything about who we were, as long as they give us a new identity, that's pretty good, it's okay. They've been taking people, stripping them of who they are, usually through a process of intensive shaming and obstruction that makes it appear as if they defaulted and did not actually honor the obligations or the commitments they knew they had, because they're trying to get them to meet obligations and commitments they were never informed of, that somebody else expects to get credit for. But they got 5 or 6 options they can call at any one moment, and at least if one of those 5 or 6 options goes well, they get credit. It's the other 4 or 5 people that are going to have to deal with the liability, right? But every once in a while, you need some cash opened up. You need to make some big deals. You need some liquidity, right? And different places have different proprietary understandings of how to acquire that. Is that what you call a trade secret? I think that's what they think they're saying, right? It's a trade secret. We can't reveal that information. It's confidential. If I ask you, and you say you don't know, and you lie, it's a lot different than you thinking you're going to pull the wool over my eyes by just not mentioning it at the time and hoping I never find out. See, 15 years ago, you got away with that. 15, 17, 25 years ago, you got away with just not mentioning what you were really seeking, thinking I'd never find out. 10 years ago, you didn't. 12 years ago, you didn't. And every single year since, you have not. I asked you directly. I told you directly. These are the facts as I understand them. When you say to me, I'm sorry, that's not possible, that's the material misinformation. It's fraud. It's worse. Now, I'm really concerned because I'm reaching a very significant psycho-emotional plateau. I've been a very long time without talking to anybody that demonstrates the most basic humanity, compunction for consideration of other people. I'm constantly subjected to circular conversations, usually aimed at trying to secure a drug deal or trying to engage in some illicit activity I'm not gonna fucking do. It's been my life for years. In the meantime, I'm witness to or party to directly, including through my intercession with so-called administrators, whether public or private, attempting to steal what I already have in one manner or another. And presumably, I'm not qualified at whatever level to even get consideration from an agency when I report a crime, or the court when I have to go to court. But what I do is incredibly valuable. And somebody else ends up getting that, and yet they don't want to acknowledge where they're getting it from. So a couple years down the road, all these things default, and they don't want to tell you that's what's going on. Right now there's information in the news saying that Russia is on the verge of defaulting on its bond obligation, including in connection with the fact the United States has prevented American institutions from paying out on or addressing bonds associated with Russia. But Russian central bank, the central bank of the Russian Federation, earlier this year already cut off American and U.S.-based financial institutions from its banking system. It began to take action in and of its own accord. Now, I've watched for 2 years how coinage issues, stock issues, major deals through the central bank of Russia, the Russian Federation, correlated directly 100% real time, and that precisely with major moments in the political campaigns of people running for the office of the president, including the office of the president, but also later after the election, when major announcements were made about their policy, or they went to different places in order to engage certain activities. It was that precise. If the Central Bank of Russia, the Russian Federation, was actually financing those events connected to members of American political office, I contend they have a duty to disclose. If one of the reasons that they cut off American financial institutions is because they were doing business, and in the course of that, it was being laundered to support election activity for American politicians, I contend they have a duty to disclose that's what they did. But more than this duty to disclose, that would also give us a capacity to move on, is understanding who in the United States decided they were going to take American citizens and contrive to attempt to extort us into playing out these scenarios as if we were Russian assets, or if we were assets of other countries, including countries that are sanctioned, so that then they could either accuse us in their acts of defrauding us of some manner of justification for defrauding us because we were complicit with some crime, supporting some sort of sanctioned entity, or they could launder money in connection with using our lives and refusing to acknowledge when we had actually honored our obligations and commitments, so it gave the appearance of default. See, what I've realized is I've never defaulted. Never. Not once. I was never in debt. Never, not once. Even if you saw a balance on a credit card bill, I didn't default. If I wasn't on time, I was ahead of time, and I did work at a level way above what they wanted to credit me for, and that's why they won't acknowledge what I did at the time. And now we're all the way down the road, and the disparity is that severe. And I just had to walk into a library. It has an exhibit on the Palestinian Nakba. While we live in a state that has implemented measures that say that you can be visited with political reprisal if you boycott an Israeli business, including in his boycott that would support Palestinians who understand those business activities are bringing them material harm, including threats of violence or actual visitation of acts of violence, or dispossessing them of the economic means to provide for themselves. While I see these people trying to signify Palestinian while they hook up drug deals, in the course of my understanding that the kind of so-called culture that they are entitled to is completely anathema to the actual literal material struggle of people that are under occupation and that are trying to assert their rights to their own national self-determination. And I'm sorry, this isn't just people on the street. We're talking about people that work in the medical sector. We're talking about people who work in city services. We're even talking about people that work for the damn police, trying to hustle these illicit black market illegal deals as if it's their culture. And because their culture has, in the past at least, not so far as I've recognized recently, but in the past at least, put them into confrontation with state power in ways that, at least historically, were racially disproportionate, well, somehow that puts them in some sort of alliance with the Palestinian people. And so every time you smoke a joint, it's like you're doing it in solidarity. And yet they spend 4 years refusing to actually address necessary matters related to cybersecurity, related to financial security, related to stopping terrorist attacks, including terrorist attacks involving chemical weapons, related to terrorist attacks, including terrorist attacks that blew up police centers, including acts of kidnapping, including acts of sexual violence. No, they just didn't have the time, or they couldn't refer me to the right person to do that, but they were right on, that fucking precise, in flipping 1001 Arabian Nights from May 21st of 2019 to a fashion show about the Palestinian Nakba on May 21st of 2022. You know, they have these lights on in buildings down here. They used to have more flags, flagging themselves Ukraine. Everybody's in solidarity with the Ukraine, but whenever it comes time for the bills to get paid, it's not fucking posting Ukraine. We can't fucking figure out how to get them the money. People on the street say, well, we need things here. We shouldn't be sending money to the Ukraine. We need that stuff here. We got poor people. You got the same hustle working for 4 years. Same corporations doing the same bullshit misrepresentations of stock issues and quarterly earnings statement profits. They rotate stock in these boards and in these workers' places, these non-profits where people administer services to the poor. They got their job. They get paid. The same people are on the fucking street. Maybe they got a little bit of time off the street. The same people are on the street if they're here at all. Now we got the situation where they're rotating stock more frequently. So you might see people, I've been on here now what would be 3 quarters. I'm going on 3 quarters on the street. They did the same hustle in April and May that they did in September and October. It's still working. They had their 6 months. And then when the next 6 months came, they started it over. But the people from that first 6-month stock issue, I haven't seen one of them. I haven't seen one of them. They disappeared. Where did they go? You got replacements with the same demographics, but it's not the same people from the first tranche. It's not the same people from September and October. Where'd they go? You got the same demographics stepping up for another round, but it's not the same people it was back then, and they haven't appeared anywhere. I haven't seen any of them. Any of them. And here's the problem. If they thought they were entitled to bust my ass down, put me on the street because they had some stock due, I owe them stock! They got the stock issue. We're now more than 60 days from that 6-month period. 60 days, boys and girls. You forfeited. You forfeited over and over again. But now, even if you thought you were entitled to forfeit because you had some stock due, you defaulted. And that's what that shooting in Uvalde is about. We've had years of cyclical, predictive school shootings. School shootings are a very, very, very specific kind of economic indicator. Presumably all these Texas guys that themselves should be getting indicted right now want to step up and say something about the school shooting, right? How many of those boys need to get their bar cards pulled? How many of them need to be disbarred and need to be impeached before they're indicted? See, that should have happened before this school shooting. Don't you dare let them use this school shooting as insurance to keep from getting indicted for what they did that led up to it. My understanding of that school shooting is it wasn't supposed to happen in Texas. They were hoping somebody else would be liquefied. And if that liquidity had opened up the way it needed to, Texas would have escaped the bullet. But that's not what happened. Somebody, they said defaulted, didn't default. And other people who are trying to cover their ass by saying the other person did so they can lean on them, did. Big time. My understanding is it's not Russia in danger of defaulting. It's the entire world. Somebody set up a process where they had options for a global debt default swap, with the understanding that one guy's debt is somebody else's gain. But what does that mean? Am I supposed to go down there and get myself one of those Palestinian dresses and then try to sign up for the Ukrainian Special Forces? See, I couldn't be who I was with the Palestinians because that wasn't an ally of the United States and they're all terrorists. But could I do what I would have done in support of national self-determination for the Palestinian people, for the Ukrainian people, and get away with it? Maybe even be called a hero? It would make a difference to you, wouldn't it? If I had kin, if I had family from the Ukraine, would that make a difference to you? I'm right here in Dallas. Right? Where are you? I just want to say for the record, there are accusations that people I used to know who are Palestinian supported what's been done to me, as if somehow it was going to advantage them in their national self-determination efforts. I assure you that I have absolutely no reason to believe there's any truth to that. I think it's a massive, massive libel. And not only that, I think it is evidence of and a further indication of their intent to commit genocide against the Palestinian people. But they're not stopping with the Palestinian people, and this is the big problem. When are you going to respond? When are you going to respond? When are you going to respond?